Crest, for the effort of putting on the event today and inviting us to dive into issues that affect the SME community and the Australian industry community. We've heard several times today about the importance of Australian industry, critically in supporting what is absolute priority, which is the capability of the ADF. So we're here to touch on a number of topics and themes that the USAsia Centre has suggested that we address. We've got an excellent panel with which to do that, and before I go into any further detail, we will just walk through each panel member and have them introduce themselves in a brief, short intro. So over to you, Darryl.
Okay, thanks Chris, and thanks for the organisers. My name's Darryl Hockey. I'm one of the Deputy Chairman of the Henderson Alliance. We're an industry group. We're the only SME-only industry group in Australia, to the best of our knowledge. We're still fairly new. We've only been going about 18 months, but we've got 80 members already, and we're continuing to grow. We see ourselves as a progressive and collaborative group. We focus mainly on defence and mainly on maritime, but that doesn't limit us to what we do. We've got a broader picture as to where we want to go. We've been actively involved with the Team WA concept that Kris has been very ably leading, and so we're very supportive of what he's doing. We're part of the Australian Defence Alliance nationally, and also we will be participating with our AIG SME group. We are a group of volunteers. We don't have any paid people. We don't receive any government support at all. And our role, we see, is to promote the capabilities of SMEs in WA and develop their capabilities, to advocate the best interests of SMEs, and to provide a platform for networking and for members to come together to do bundled offerings. So we facilitate training events and workshops and B2B sessions to allow SMEs to have access to primes. We'd love to do more, but we don't have a lot of government funding. We don't have any government funding, so hopefully over the future we'll be able to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, Darryl. Jodie?
Thanks. Just further to everything that Darryl said, as part of the Henderson Alliance, I'm also Senior Relationship Manager for Business Foundations. I've chosen to take a little bit of a different approach to my contribution this afternoon. You'll see quite a personal slide up on the screen behind me. I've chosen to take this approach because I want to make it really clear that I have a life with lots of interests, lots of things I like to do, a big family, I like to come together through food, but I've also put a couple of black and white pictures up there as well, which are representative of my family history. That is, there's one that shows logging and the mills that were built in the Perth Hills in Jarrahdale, and the other one is of a state ship. My father was a merchant seaman, working in the 1950s, bringing cargo in and out of the Fremantle port. Ultimately, the point behind what I'm trying to convey through these images is that in defence are real people with lives outside of defence. In the SMEs that we're talking about, providing services through the supply chain to defence are real people. These are the people that the people of the Defence Department protect in their work every day. They create the backbone of our nation, and small to medium business employs 65% of all people in our country. So I just really want us all to be mindful when we talk about defence and when we talk about business and when we talk about SMEs, we're talking about Australian people, our nation, our business opportunities, our wealth, and our families. So that's kind of my approach.
On that message, next is Erich Hofmann from Hofmann Engineering, which is a multi-generational Australian business involved in defence, and Erich's taken it from strength to strength. So Erich will introduce you.
Thanks, Kris. Yes, I'm the Managing Director of Hofmann's. My father started the company in 1969, so we're 50 years in business next year. He and my uncle came out to Australia as 10-pound Germans. in 1959 and loved the country, got mum to come over, and then I was made at Cockatoo Island. And then in 69 they started the business in Dinella, so just in the suburbs here in a backyard. And it's grown from strength to strength. I was 4 years old when the company started and I got brainwashed into engineering. And fortunately I brainwashed my 3 kids into engineering as well. We're all ex-UWA. And the company's grown. It's grown slowly. We've had good roots. We have now just over 500 people. We have 6 manufacturing sites in Perth, in Melbourne, in Bendigo and Newcastle. We have overseas facilities, a factory in Peru and a factory in Chile, and then we have offices in North America, China and India. The mining industry has been very good to us, but I've been very passionate to have a balanced portfolio. So I've been very passionate to build the business in the defence arena and build that up. One of the good things with the family company that Dad started, we're debt-free, so we own the land, the buildings, which means you can sleep at night and things go on and you drive the company on cash flow. We have over 50 apprentices, and so we've got quite a detailed apprentice training and cadet engineer process, and that really sees us growing. 1/3 of our workforce are ex-apprentices. And we're 50% export, so half our products are exported, so we know what it takes to export to overseas companies.
Wonderful. The export message there as well is relevant to our, the export message I was saying is relevant to our next guest, next panellist, the Honourable David Johnston. Over to you.
Thanks, Kris. Former Defence Minister, former Minister for Customs and Justice, and 5 years as Opposition Spokesperson in Defence. As Dr. Kiernan said, Australian defence industry is now a fundamental input to capability, Australian defence capability. What does that mean for us? The Commonwealth acknowledges that having one customer is not as sustainable as it might be for SMEs and even for some primes. And so what the policy shift, and it's a 180-degree policy shift, is about, is taking Australian industry to the rest of the world, to our trusted friends and allies. And why do we want to do that? We want to improve the bottom line of Australian defence industry so that they can spend more money and have more revenue on R&D, which in turn gets to the nub of why we have the policy, better capability for the Australian Defence Force. And so in all of that, I'm out there, government to government, extolling the virtues of Australian industrial capability. Remember, the sole function of our Defence Force is narrowed and distilled right down to, in the battle space, we must fight and win. There is no prize for second. Anything that enhances our capacity to have an edge, to have an industrial upper hand, to produce things faster and better, is what our ADF must have. And that's why the export policy is supported by trained defence attachés, informed ambassadors, good defence staff in embassies extolling the virtues of Australian defence industry, and of course EFIC Finance and Austrade working with defence to promote Australian defence industry. So that's what the policy is fundamentally focused on, and it all comes down to better capability for the ADF.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And to close off the introductions, I'm Kris Constantinides. I'm the chairman of AIDN-WA. We're a not-for-profit organisation. We work closely with Henderson Alliance in promoting the interests of industry. And really that's about skilling, that's about our belief in capabilities, that's about next generation of Australian businesses, that's about pathways for the school children. And again, it all feeds back to ensuring we're positioned to support the ADF as an SME community. Additionally, I'm the General Manager of Airflight, which is an aviation business that has supported the Royal Australian Air Force fleet of PC-9s since 1994, and we've got a number of other defence contracts. So that is the perspectives of this panel and our background, but now we'll launch into a couple of themes. The first theme is the key opportunities for innovation and collaboration for SMEs in relation to WA Defence. So I'll start with a question for Darryl. How do SMEs collaborate with the larger prime contractors or with each other? So we heard from the primes before that one of the major export pathways, one of the major ways of doing business was to engage with them. How do SMEs go about collaborating with primes or with each other?
Yeah, thanks, Kris. Well, in a number of ways, and obviously through the CDIC support services, there's a strong drive there to create the relationships between SMEs and primes. But that's, of course, always done on a one-to-one basis. But that's going directly with primes. The other way to do it is through the supply chain, to try to form partnerships with existing European suppliers, for instance, to get agency agreements or OEMs or do technology transfer arrangements with them. And the other collaboration is with each other between SMEs, where they can form partnerships or create work relationships or package offerings to the primes. Now, what has the Henderson Alliance done with primes? Well, to supplement the work done by CDIC, we've arranged a number of sessions where we've got multiple attendees together. We've brought the primes in there. We've allowed them to do some direct question and answers with the primes. We've set up some speed dating type events where SMEs can have a chance to sell their wares to the primes and to establish a relationship. And we see that that's really, really valuable. We get really good feedback from the SMEs that really enjoy that, and it gives them an immediate feedback on where they're going. But it's also really appreciated by the primes. We've had them come back to us and say that it's very time-consuming going through relationships with SMEs, and to have the opportunity to do a whole lot in one session, it's really good for them. So we'd like to do more of that, obviously. In relation to the supply chain, as I said, setting up relationships between SMEs and European suppliers, existing suppliers, that's obviously very difficult because you've got to get direct engagement internationally, and it's difficult to set up face-to-face opportunities. Expos are obviously a very good opportunity to do that. But in that regard, I guess WA probably needs to do a bit more. You know, when we look at what's happening in the other states, the facilitation of those types of events is probably a little bit more developed than here in Western Australia. So that's something that we'll be working with the new Defence West on trying to make sure that we do more of that work. And in relation to collaborating with each other, you know, SMEs can do that through industry bodies, but we also set up a very good interstate collaboration event a few months ago. And we had about, Jodie can probably talk about it later, but we got people in from interstate, and it was a really good opportunity for those partnerships to be established and relationships to be established. And just to look at one example, with the OPVs, the first two will be built in Adelaide, and then the others will come to Perth. It's a really good opportunity for West Australian SMEs to partner with South Australian SMEs so that when the third ship comes over to be built, it can be a seamless transition. So that's the sort of work that we're looking at. But I think the important thing is, Kris, that we see that the opportunity for doing this, creating these relationships between the primes and the SMEs is now, it's urgent, we've really got to get onto it. But as much as anything, the onus is on the SMEs to create that first engagement. And so I think that's the type of work that we'll be doing a lot more of over the next few months.
That's great, thank you, Darryl. And I'll put on record that I appreciate the passion and conviction that Darryl and the team at Henderson Alliance bring consistently in pushing those industry things together. It's what's enabled AIDN and Henderson Alliance to work arm in arm, because we share that common cause and that common passion. Once we have an SME business that is engaging with the prime or has that face contact that is sometimes provided by industry associations or others, the next question that arises can sometimes be around defence readiness. So, Jodie, in your capacity around business improvement initiatives, what is your view on defence readiness, and how do SMEs get prepared to engage with the defence supply chain?
First of all, I think it's really important that SMEs reflect on not just what it is to be defence ready, but are you ready for what it means to be involved with defence? It's not for every business, and as with mining and all of the other major industries that feed work to SMEs, sometimes it's a better strategic decision not to engage in the supply chain to defence. So you've got to be really clear that you have something of unique value to offer a prime. We don't need a million fabricators all trying to weld ships together. Ultimately, I think it's really important, probably just to recap on some of the things that previous speakers have said today around understanding, the supply chain to defence is a long time frame. You have to have robust systems set up in your business. In my career, the conversations that I have are at the coalface with business every day. Ultimately, where I see a lot of the struggles in business in Western Australia is that people have opportunities, they have networks, they have aspirations, but really good, robust business systems, really good operational management, the funding to invest in skills for our future, the futures of those businesses, in really robust quality management systems. They're all absolutely integral aspects to your own businesses to consider, because at the end of the day, you've got to be thinking about, and I'm going to relate back to my slide, you've got to think about, are you going to go home at the end of the day happy, healthy, able to have weekends, able to sleep, to quote Mr. Hofmann, but also are you able to put out a product that is intended for an end user who protects our borders. So I would say use the advocacy groups available to you, and I'm moving away from how can they be ready to advise on how to be ready. Use AIDN-WA, use the Henderson Alliance, speak to your peak industry bodies, and make sure that's a sector that you really want to be engaging in.
Excellent, thank you, Jodie. To follow on from the theme of innovation and collaboration, then, Erich, I'll pose a question to you. As you've grown and diversified, what role has collaboration and innovation played in your success?
Thanks, Kris. Well, without innovation and research and development, Hofmann's wouldn't exist. We spend about $30 million a year on research and development, and we try and innovate whenever we can. We've even embedded it into our software and ERP system, so when a customer comes along and says this part keeps breaking, or it's too expensive, or it needs to last longer, we get a buzz out of re-engineering it, making it last longer or cheaper or whatever we can do, and it's actually part of the questionnaire when they send the estimate out, and that's our marketing angle. And it's enabled the growth of the company and our export business to do something, try a bit harder, do it a little bit better. Collaboration, that works well when you don't compete. So if you have a partner that you don't compete with, and a good example, we were awarded 3 bow thrusters, 1 megawatt bow thrusters for Fincantieri. And fortunately, we were one of the few companies that kept our order after they lost C5000. And to build those bow thrusters, we partnered with Veeam that do the bronze and make the bronze parts of it. Now, Fincantieri in Europe get about 10 companies to bake all the bits, and then IKEA assemble it in Italy. And of course, here they found a company that's 100% West Australian with Veeam and us that we basically build the whole thing. And that worked exceptionally well. It's obviously over $1 million order. And, pardon the pun, it's thrust us into the bow thruster game because you have to have RENA certification and all the rest, which a company over here, without that push from the government to do Australian content, we wouldn't have got. So that's been great. Then we have collaborations that don't work quite as well. On the Hunter-class frigates, one of our competitors, an English company that's making the gearboxes, we've tried very hard to partner with them and say, listen, we can build, we have everything here to build it. And we've tried for a year and a half and they're not even talking to us on it. And yet the world's leading naval propulsion gearbox company, which is a German company called Erich, they've straight away said via letter here, 80% can be built and it would be built in Perth in Western Australia in our facility. So there you can see the difference in collaboration there. The other ones, when you get up to the prime level and trying to collaborate with the primes, they often are making a decision, do they set up a facility in a state or do they collaborate with a company? And an example that was up on the screen before was with our submarines. We have, to put a factory together like that to roll to stress relieve, to weld together, to 5-axis machine the submarine hulls is, you know, you're talking multi-million dollars. Well, we have one facility like that in Perth and one in Bendigo. They run 24/7. For us to basically put a submarine hull section together is a few months' work, and then the rest of the time they can be doing mining equipment and all that would be sustainable going through. And even when these submarines go, we've been going for 50 years, we have that portfolio of work to keep. So obviously we're trying to say, well, we can do that type of work as well.
That's excellent.
Good.
Okay, thank you. It's clear that the investment in innovation is one of the key drivers in your capacity to manage that as a business and prioritise that within your business is perhaps one of the areas of success there and how you're able to turn innovation into commercialisation, which is a credit to you. David, to you, in relation to your role as export advocate, I know personally that you're very passionate about promoting the interests of Australian industry. How does innovation like what's been described and that collaborative approach help you when you're pitching Australian businesses and Australian capability to primes or to foreign governments? How does that type of attitude and approach to business assist you in your role?
Well, Kris, I've just come back from Euro-Naval, which is a very big international expo run in Paris. And everything Erich has been talking about is on display. And we had a number of Western Australian presenters there who were really, Australia was the second largest presenter at Euro-Naval after France. And I was very proud of that. And the things that we do with software, with manufacturing disciplines, methodologies, you know, the things that are not, you know, we don't make aerospace platforms or warships per se, but we do a lot of little stuff that's vitally important. So black box integration is absolutely amazing. Now, not many people understand that in anti-ship missile defence, which is a very technical area, Australia has a system that actually augments and bolts onto the Aegis system, which is the one system throughout Western navies that protects ships from fast sea skimming missiles. Now, for us to be able to do that, I know that when I say that to people in France and in Japan, they are amazed that we can do that integration. And so I don't want to sell them any of that. I just want to show them that we can do it because it's the tip of a very successful iceberg. And may I say, Erich's organisation is one of the exemplars of churning money back into R&D to produce better product. And that's the model Defence is looking for in supporting defence industry exports. And so innovation is crucial at underpinning the investment that we have both by defence and by industry. Because if you're innovative and you're doing things with a wow factor that the world acknowledges, and I've just seen it happening, the world is your oyster, so to speak, and we can do great things in defence, taking that success and turning it into capability.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll move on to our second theme, and that relates to the Defence White Paper and how that has shifted the environment for defence industry. And I think focusing on strategy, albeit a national strategic document, on a day when we've had a Premier announce a West Australian strategic document, I think is relevant to understand how strategy at government level can flow through to industry. So in specific reference to the Defence White Paper, Jodie, have you touch across businesses in multiple industries, obviously in your role in business improvement areas. Have you seen an increase in the number of businesses getting interested in defence that are not necessarily in defence to begin with?
Yes, absolutely. The interest in the supply chain to defence has increased at an absolutely astronomical rate. I can vouch from our experience as the Henderson Alliance alone that in 18 months we've had 10 members and have gone to over 80. So I think when people understand what it is you're trying to provide in industry and engage and want to join in on what you're doing that quickly, that in itself, that's raw data right there to show the increase in interest. Further to that, earlier this year we held an SME showcase, which Darryl touched on just previously. We did that in collaboration with yourself, Kris, and DTC and our good friends in AIDN-WA. We saw over 125 SMEs, business owners, and influencers and contributors to the supply chain to defence come together to look at the collaborative opportunities that could come out of that showcase. It was really, really good to see businesses from the south and east coast of Australia go to Henderson and do site tours of our amazing space down there and the companies that are already delivering. But it was also great to see them engaging with primes to really, relating again to what I said before, to get a really clear understanding of how to talk to primes, to ask them what they want to see, to test out the marketing strategies that they'd put together using quad charts and speaking in prime defence language, to be looking at what they want to offer and what's needed. The white paper, all the white papers have been brilliant. They show the absolute scope of how important the defence supply chain is, but also now with the new WA defence strategy, we've got some pretty hefty promises, and hopefully it comes with some pretty hefty funding.
Excellent, thank you. I'll leave that for others to confirm or deny. Darryl, just from an existing defence supplier perspective, what impact do you think the white paper has on those existing industry players?
Well, look, Kris, I think a very short answer, what a magnificent opportunity this is for Australia and for Australian SMEs. So congratulations to the federal government for setting up this new program, and which is going to establish sovereign capability within Australia and a truly Australian shipbuilding industry for the future. Well, it's other defence industries as well. Sorry, I tend to focus on shipbuilding because I see that's where most of the short-term opportunities are. But and there's probably two sides to it. Obviously, there's the construction side of the new build, but there's also the sustainment in the future. And as everyone always says, there's about 4 times as much money involved in sustainment as there is in construction. And given Western Australia's strategic location and the resources that we have here, we would like to think that Western Australia will soon become the sustainment capital for Australia. So that's an announcement we'd certainly like to see sooner rather than later. But getting back to those opportunities that I mentioned, this all won't just happen by itself. Primes won't just come along and knock on the doors of SMEs and say, would you please come and work with us? The primes aren't going to pick up a yellow pages and go through there and look for some particular supplier. The onus is on our industry to go out there and seize this opportunity. Otherwise, it's just simply not going to happen. I wouldn't mind just mentioning quickly in relation to the WA strategy, which was just talked about. It's a little bit like an iceberg. Today there was an announcement of a very good strategy, but the development of that took many, many months of consultation, and it was a terrific job done by Major General Jeff Singleman, and we'd like to give him great credit for what he did. And it was something interesting happened in that process. He consulted to such an extent that in some ways he brought the industry together with him. And there's a document which floats just below the surface, and that's a whole set of recommendations as to how that overall strategy is going to be delivered. And I'm talking about, I think, more than the Henderson Alliance now, I can safely talk on behalf of other industry stakeholders. We absolutely fully support the recommendations that he put into that report, and we're really looking forward to all of them being implemented over the coming months, because WA has a great opportunity here, and if we're going to seize it fully, then we're going to have to go through, to adopt those recommendations that Jeff came up with.
Great, thank you. Just shifting back then to the white paper, Erich, your business is one that obviously has had a clear strategic path. How much of that strategic path for your business was influenced by the strategy defined in the white paper?
Thanks, Kris. Well, first, thanks to the government for the leadership and vision to put the white paper out and allow companies for us to bid on projects. I mean, it's been a fantastic opportunities. All the primes had open doors, nearly all of them. And we've got to go to Rolls-Royce, to General Electric, to Lucerne, to BAE, to Rheinmetall, to Lockheed Martin, seeing all the F-35s. And it's been a great opportunity to see all that happening. And what you learn when I come back here and we go to our mining customers, and of course we've had to put all QA systems in, AS 9100 for aerospace and defence work and all. And so I can go quite proudly to the BHPs and FMGs and Rio Tintos and say, well, your crusher is built to aerospace accuracy and systems. And that's a very good selling point, because obviously to do that you have to have all those systems. It's also been very good for winning orders. I mean, we've won a number of big orders, Fincantieri bow thrusters. The last 2 years running, we've been named BAE in Sainsbury's leading tooling supplier with about $10 million of orders per year for the F-35. And that's been good. It's also catapulted us into other areas. For example, Airbus and Safran. From the success that we had there, they heard about that and they approached us. And they said, we've got a project where we want to land the Airbus A320, and to save fuel, we want to turn off the engines and electrically drive it to the bridge and then electrically drive it to the runway. And for that, we need self-aligning pinions and electric motors in the wheels. And they said, Hofmann, you make self-aligning pinions. So they gave us 5 weeks to design and build it, and it went on to their test facility in Paris. Now, as our number comes, only one to survive. And it's been, unfortunately, the fuel price went down then, so that we only made 12 of them, but hopefully now the fuel price going up, it takes off. But it's given us very unique opportunities like that as a small little Australian company, you wouldn't get a chance to do. So it's been fantastic.
Great. Okay, and then from the perspective of a former Defence Minister, why is publishing and sharing a strategy like what we saw through the Defence White Paper, why is that so important?
Well, Kris, in our neighbourhood and further afield, we also pride ourselves on our democratic process. And so if our neighbours and even our potential adversaries know the way we do our business and we plan to do our business, if our adversaries and potential adversaries know what we plan to do and the way we plan it, and they see that we are prepared to quote the funding for it, and on page 180 of the white paper you will see a very orderly step up to 2% of GDP 10 years from 2013. Now that sends a clear message to our friends and allies and to others that we are serious, and we have a word for that: we are dinkum. We are dinkum about funding defence strategy, we are dinkum about formulating defence policy. And so white papers are really very, very important as a plan. The defence portfolio, of course, is the only portfolio that plans 10, 20 and 30 and beyond years ahead. Many other portfolios have great difficulty in dealing with the way defence has to plan. And so when you do a white paper that's credible, you put the money up. And indeed, the 2016 white paper, if I may be so bold, is the most credible document Australia has produced in the defence space. And I simply echo the words of Sir Arthur Tang back in the 70s. Any strategic strategy is valueless unless there is money to support it. And so our neighbourhood can see that we are dinkum. We sustain, we acquire, we support, we fund. Our personnel, our plant and equipment, etc. And that's what a white paper is. It sends a message to the world that we are dinkum.
Yep. And I think, like with any great strategy, which is a pertinent point for today as well in the context of the West Australian situation, is that any great strategy must be backed by several executable steps that mirror precisely the desired impact of that strategy. And it's our collective job as a defence community to ensure that we're aligning to achieve that. I'll move to our final theme, and we'll move through these questions in about a minute and a half because that clock is moving suspiciously quickly. But the final theme is the challenges and opportunities that are currently facing SMEs, and this alone could be a whole day's worth of a conference. But Erich, in relation to your business, just quickly, what are the challenges you face, and what do you think are the next opportunities in defence for your business?
Well, some of the opportunities, let's start with the positive. For example, we won the Victorian Rail contract. The Chinese won it. It's equivalent to the West Australian one that's going. That's enabled us to spend millions on a robotic production and machining line for making thousands of bogies, wheels, castings. And we've strategically set it up so it can do Rheinmetall Boxer, it can do defence work, it can do multiple other tasks. Without that, it has to be, and of course, I don't know how the Victorian government did it, but it has to be built not just in Australia, it has to be 60% built in Victoria. And they audit your purchase orders to make sure you actually are complying. And, that's been, very, very good for us. And the challenge I have is, what does Australian industry content mean in the Defence Force now that's happening here? I'll give you an example. On C5000, we quoted many companies, various components. And one of them on the Type 26 are the 100-tonne electric motors. And these electric motors, they said, well, doing an IKEA assembly of the motors in our factory in Perth, your price is even better than we do in the UK. And I thought, oh, that's great, but Christ, your component prices are high. And I'm thinking, ooh, I check the rates, what we do, the mining industry, and our prices are the same. And I said, how's that? And they said, oh, well, we get it from Eastern Europe. So the real challenge now is, and we've gone through them, is, how we compete and what is the Australian industry content when they're buying the components out of Eastern Europe where the labour rates are $7 and $8 an hour. You can't compete. So it's going to be, what does Australian industry content actually mean, and what does sovereign capability mean for the country? And that question really hasn't been answered. It'd be nice to what the Victorian government said, and 60% built in Australia, done. And we're auditing your purchase orders.
Yeah, and I think that definition of Australian content has been evolving. The definition of what an Australian business has been evolving, which is good. But Darryl, you cut across a number of businesses in the defence sector. Would you subscribe to those opportunities and challenges in a broad context? Yeah,
well, obviously there is a number of challenges for SMEs just to become more defence ready, to get the international accreditations, to get their R&D programs in place, to get their QA and documentation systems in place, and to get their cyber security systems working. Those things are really needed to supplement the skills that they already have. But look, I wouldn't mind just quickly talking about what I see as the greatest opportunity of all, which is right here and right now, and which other people don't tend to look at much. The opportunity for Western Australian SMEs from the frigate and submarine programs in South Australia is huge. There's $85 billion worth of spend there. As somebody said a little bit earlier, about 70% of that will be subcontracted. South Australia simply cannot do it all, and they're not even going to try to do it all. So it's the other states have an opportunity to come in and seize a share of that action now. We see that there's at least a $10 billion opportunity there if Western Australia really focuses on getting that. And if we secure that part of the supply chain, we'll also get the sustainment work in the years after that. And so there's a really great opportunity to focus here, and not just on defence, because in Western Australia we have some amazing capabilities. What happened in the oil and gas infrastructure boom with the mining industry and all the other associated industries saw some fantastic, highly complex SMEs delivering those services. And I still claim the best SME recruits we haven't got into defence yet. They're still out there, and we need to recruit them and to bring them over. So in the future, I believe there's an opportunity for a very vibrant industry ecosystem of advanced manufacturing, and we're trying to work with Regional Development Australia at the moment to assist them in creating an export hub for SMEs, which is going to service the Western Trade Coast.
Excellent, thank you. And Jodie, do you share this optimism that there's opportunities for Australian business moving forward in defence?
Yeah, I think we talked earlier about whether or not businesses can adapt. Ultimately, if they're going to, the time is now. There is no other time, it is now. Every business that I deal with has incredibly transferable skills, amazing intellectual property, very diverse infrastructure and equipment. We've got really incredible industry here in WA, and I'm personally, obviously, a very proud Western Australian. Ultimately, I think we need to learn from the lessons, the very hard lessons that came off the back of the resources boom and from oil and gas. Cash flow in businesses is king, and you can't afford to put all your eggs in one basket. The supply chain to defence is offering another basket, as is lithium, energy metals, and lots of other opportunities that we foresee on the western trade coast of WA. But ultimately, we need some real transparency, some support and some honesty from government and from Defence about exactly what those opportunities look like and how we can engage with them and support our members to engage with them as well.
Yeah, very true. Thank you. Final question for David. What opportunities lie beyond our borders? So we're focusing here on the Australian context. What's beyond?
Well, I think I've explained a little bit about that, but look, we do a lot of interesting things. Education is an opportunity for us. So Defence Forces and strategic planners in other countries can come here and learn cyber defence. They can learn about how to draw up a white paper. We can show them a whole lot of things. So education is a service. Maintaining their planes, their boats and their vehicles is something we can do. The opportunities for us are virtually endless, but we must have friends, trusted friends and allies. We're in a highly regulated space. So to do that, we have to have trade control approval. And once that's obtained, the Commonwealth is there to support those people going forward in a whole new way. And so the new paradigm is one that I'm really pleased about. Defence is warming to the task. There are fabulous officers for industry and for export in Canberra that are doing really good work. The attachés are very forward-leaning on this, and I think the opportunities are boundless. The big opportunity here right now is to get our SMEs and mid-tiers into the supply chain for the primes. And BAE is building 32 Type 26s across the world. So if we're doing something really good for the Hunter class, we can be doing something really good for the Canadians and for the Brits. It's that simple.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, David. And I'll just summarise there and say thank you to all of you for listening to us. Thank you again to the organisers, to the federal and state government for their continued support of defence issues. We're all very optimistic about the opportunities for SMEs. So for those primes out there, we encourage you to look within Australia for your solutions. And to the SME community, we encourage you to look outside for increased opportunities and diversity. So from all of us, thank you very much.